I've been lucky for the most of my life. I've traveled and fly fished the great rivers of the West, and I've seen a lot of things, but you know, these memories and these experiences, yeah, they made me a better fly fisherman, but it's really solidified in my mind the core principles in fly fishing. You know, basically, you know, fly fishing is two things. It's pretty simple. It's two things. You're either dry fly fishing or you're nymph fishing, and you choose to do one or the other. I can probably tell you that probably not one thing has changed more in fly fishing than the physical act of nymph fishing. There's so many ways to do it. Back in the day, it was, you know, tied a nymph on, put a little bit of split shot on the, you know, a foot above the nymph, and you threw it in the river and you caught fish. You know, fast forward to today, and yeah, just there's so many ways to do it, and they're all good ways. I mean, there's Czech nymphing, French nymphing, Polish nymphing. There's all the Euro styles. There's American Euro. There's drop shotting. There's classic, high stick, short line, tight line, and probably missing a few, strike indicator fishing. These are all effective ways to nymph fish. And even though I've chosen to do one of those styles primarily, you know, I'm not going to tell people, you know, what style's the best or what style's the worst. You know, each way you do it can be really effective. And I see a lot of this stuff on magazines and YouTube and whatnot, social media, where some guy will get on and he'll expound the virtues of his particular style of nymphing and all the great things, and then they go on to other guys will go on to dispel you from using another certain way, or you can improve your way to do this or you do that. Well, the way I view things is they're all good. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. But there's very little commonality in the sense that each one is separately different than the other, depending on basically the leader you're using. But then again, they can all catch fish. And if I could say that there's really one common trait I've seen over the years that all these styles of nymphing have is, and what we truly don't really, many of us truly don't even really understand this, is that the failure to catch trout nymphing is pretty much the same for every style. So if you can just grasp the idea of why I'm not catching fish, it doesn't really matter what style of nymphing you do. If you understand the failure of your inability to catch trout, by correcting that, any style of nymphing will allow you to catch trout. You just pick one and get comfortable with it, and you learn it. You take the learning curve on the chin, you perfect it, you use it over and over again, and it can become extraordinarily effective for you. However, whichever one you do choose to use, strike indicator fishing, Euro fishing, high sticking, the failure to catch trout is the same for all of them. And that's basically three things. So our failures to catch fish nymphing are simply because our flies are not where trout are. So typically a trout in a river is stationary, and it's 4 to 6 inches off the bottom. And it has a left to right and an up and down kind of movement to it. And you can't really say how big that movement's going to be, because every trout's different, every river is different. But for the very few trout I've seen have just a really small waggle. What's being defined here is a target area. So that cross, that up and down movement and that side to side movement creates a target area. And what you need to do is you need to put that fly or that nymph right in that target zone. And if you do so, you have a good possibility or a good chance of catching that fish. And our failure to put flies in that target zone is generally probably one of the primary reasons why we don't catch fish. So many styles of nymphing will put your fly right on the bottom. Well, trout rarely, if ever, will actually dip down to take a fly because it's not in their grill. And they rarely go up. But food always comes to a trout. The river is a conveyor belt of food. It's just going to provide this trout with all the food it needs. It just stays right in this little area here. And whatever is presented to that to that trout, has a good possibility of being at least mouthed and spit out if trout are hungry. So when we look at the failure rate, there's really three basic reasons why you're failing in nymphing. One is your probably the most one, as we just talked about, is your inability to get the fly right in the grill. Number two is you're fishing a section of the river where there's simply no fish. Where you're fishing, there are no fish. So you may be on the bottom and everything's perfectly. You have your fly right where it needs to be, drifting through where you think there's a likelihood of trout. If they're in there, that's where they're going to be. And you can cast all day through there, and if there's no trout in there, you're not going to catch any fish. So how do we prevent that failure? Well, it's really hard to do, and the best way I can say it is you have to read the water. You have to really get cerebral and really look at water and put yourself in a trout's position. If I was a trout, I'd be right there. And the third reason why we fail at catching trout nymphing is because, simply put, the trout just aren't that hungry. They're really not that hungry. So what science tells us is trout are either hungry or they're not hungry. If they're hungry, they'll take your fly. If they're not hungry, you can hit them over the head with it. They're not going to eat it. Now, certainly there's other variables involved here, and I'm just another fly guy that's just giving you his opinion on what I've seen over the years and what I've read, my experiences. But generally speaking, of the three, the two that we have no control over, which is no fish where we're fishing, or one fish or two fish in there, and we just can't get our flies in their grill, or they're really not that hungry. There's little control that we have over that. However, what we can control is the correct weight management of our nymphing rig. And if you can wrap your head around that and really look at that as a way to improve your nymph fishing, you're going to see a pretty big difference in your success rate on the river. That's my experience. That's how I've seen it over the years. I've been fishing side by side with 2 or 3 guys, and I'm catching trout after trout, and they're not catching a single fish. We're doing it all the same style. And as I look at these guys, the reason why I'm catching fish, and they're not, is not because I have this magical nymph on. It's simply put, I'm on the bottom and they're not. Being able to recognize that I need to use a little more weight to put my fly right in that fish's grill. That's called weight management, and that is the key to successful nymphing, no matter what style of nymphing you do. Well, I'm on my way to another river, and if I'm lucky, I'll see you on the river.